My name is Kate Tribble-Lehpamer. I am 40 years old and I am an addict. First of all, talk about when I was younger. I grew up in an upper class kind of society where they never really, addiction really didn't touch people, right? Just like alcohol. Alcohol to me is a drug. People just drank and did things like that. I saw a lot of things. My parents were always on vacations, things like that. I did really good in school. I played soccer. I played sports, very athletic. Had really good friends. And then I got molested when I was younger by my cousin twice, and then another time when I was on vacation. And not that that's a crutch, but those are things that just happen, right? That I'm not going to say that that's why I use, because it's not. But those are things that happened in my life that I never fully was able to express or feel. So then high school, I'm playing sports. I have colleges looking at me for soccer, very popular. And I remember alcohol at first was the first thing that I used. And then it was weed. Actually, I was in 8th grade. I'll backtrack, and I stole. My parents have 4 bars at their house. Kind of not good for me. And I remember taking a bottle in the 8th grade and bringing it to school. I went to private schools, and coming back home, and my sister's boyfriend caught me. I was in the bathroom. He asked me if I wanted scrambled eggs, and I was drunk. And he smelled it on me. He explained it's the first time anybody ever told me, right? Because my parents were always gone. They were on vacation. They worked. They weren't bad parents, but I had a nanny and things like that. So Dan was the first person that that showed me or talked to me about alcohol and how I shouldn't use it. And so then I put it away, went to high school, and was going to parties. And in sports, you would think, well, they're all good, everybody's great, nobody does anything. Well, that's completely wrong. We would drink, go to bonfires, get wasted. I remember smoking weed. Guy passed it to me. I thought it was a cigarette, and I smoked it. And I remember feeling this amazing, feeling or whatever, because for me, I was chasing something at that young of age, which is really, really crazy. And then I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Then I went from alcohol to cocaine. I started snorting cocaine. And mind you, religion was always a part of my family, Catholicism. So we would go to church, but it was really more religious. Like, I really didn't know what I believed in. And that, for me, was a big, big point in the matter for my spiritual awakening, right, for addiction and everything that I have. So I went to, I was in high school, and after already I was drinking, doing all those things, and it became where I couldn't control it any longer. I remember coming to school drunk, and I had a game, and I remember the principal, he came up to me, and he walked past me, said, "Hey, nice goal at the last game," and he smelled it, and he said, "Come here for a minute," and he took my hand like this and went, and it made me breathe, and he smelled the alcohol. I got suspended. Then I was embarrassed, done with sports, done with all that, and I dropped out of school. It was balls to the wall. I started hanging around with the wrong people. Met a guy who was 13 years older than me, right? And now, mind you, I got injured also in soccer, and so that always became, and they gave me pain pills. That was when I really found my love for opiates. That was everything to me. So when I found this guy, I had back problems or whatever, and I'd watch him go to the hospital, and he would say that he had just back problems and back pain, and played this whole Hollywood thing and would get pills. So I went and got pills. And I, did these things. Now, I was 17 years old and I got pregnant, okay? And I remember telling my mom, and she already knew I was off the hook, see, because I already had I had already earned a crime. I had already got a felony for robbery from my next door neighbor for stealing alcohol, because that's just what I do. I go balls to the wall. And when I went to her and told her, like, Mom, I'm going to have a baby, she said, no, you're not. And I said, what do you mean? She said, you can get out of my house or you can have an abortion. And I was just like, what? I don't want to have an abortion. I left. So I left, went to my girlfriend's house, who lived in a trailer. She was an amazing girl. She actually died a few years later from dirt bike. She didn't do drugs. But I'm used to living in this huge house and having all these things and then going to her house and having nothing. So I called my mom. I said, can I come back and get my clothes? And when I did, my mother and father, they're never like, I love you. They're not those type of people. They give you things, buy you things. That's kind of how they do their love, which is okay. That's great. But for me, I realized I needed that love. And so when I went there was a 5-page letter. My mom never wrote me anything like that. And it said, I know you're trying to save the life of your child, but I'm trying to save the life of mine. And I need you to have this abortion because it'll ruin your life. And so that's what we did. And I remember driving and I was messed up. I was high as hell, driving to Planned Parenthood. My mother looked at me and said, I'm going to go to hell for this. And I'm looking at her like, wow. And I remember them seeing the heartbeat, showing me the heartbeat, and them saying, do you really want to do this? And I didn't, but I did it. I went back out there and I said, Mom, I don't think I want to do it. She said, you get your ass in there and you do it. And I did, and I covered that up. Again, not using it as a crutch, right, because I make my own choices. I don't think that anything can trigger me because I think I'm the only trigger, because I can make a ton of excuses. So then after that, I again met this guy, 13 years older. He was robbing. He had already been to prison. And he used me. He knew how to manipulate so well, and I learned so many things off him. I was the biggest manipulator. I would manipulate the president probably if I could, and that's the truth. I mean, he said, well, you live in a rich neighborhood. We should go to this house, rob this house. They're on vacation, right? You said that. And that's what we did. All because we were sick, dope sick, off opiates, pain pills at this point, Oxycontin. So that's what I did. And we 4 of us went in there and stole everything that we could that we knew was money. These people, he was an agent for sports, and I knew him, I liked him, but that shit didn't matter because all I cared about was getting high. All I cared about was the next time, the feeling, right? Because I love getting high, I just don't like the consequences that come with it. So from then on, got caught because some girl and a guy told on us, of course, and I went to prison at the age of 18 years old. Prison, 2 years. First, they gave me River City at first, but I wasn't ready. I was just basically acting fake, doing what they want me to, doing whatever they say to get me out of there, faking it, right? And I remember a girl brought in, this is so crazy, she brought in 4 grams of heroin into River City, and bam. Who was the one that couldn't wait to do it? Sold their soul because mom's sending me money, books are stacked, and I'm using heroin in a rehab, 18 years old. And got out, never drug test, got passed through that, got out. 2 months later, I'm in prison because I can't stop getting high because I never wanted to. I couldn't surrender. It was too powerful at that point. I didn't have the willingness at all. I felt like I was invincible. So I went to prison. 18 years old, Marysville. It's I don't know if you know what that is, but it's not a pretty thing. And that's when shit really was started to mess up in my life. And I still didn't believe in God, didn't pray to God, didn't believe in him at all. All the things that had happened in my life, I always blamed on God, right? That there was no God, couldn't be a God. Why me? Even though I'm not look at the choices I made. I put myself here. Nobody did this but myself. So I'm in prison and got in a fight and ended up in the hole, 2 girls and myself. And the hole, it's like a black, dark, it's horrible that you sleep on a concrete floor. They bring you your tray and they call it a hamburger meal, where they clump everything together, all your food, carrots, everything, and put it into a patty, and that's what you have to eat. Well, there was 3 guys working 3rd shift at that point. And see, in prison, they don't care. They don't call it rape in prison, really, because they think that they own you. And in your mind, they do own you, because you can't say no in prison. Back then, you couldn't. There wasn't a pre-act. And so these 3 men would come get me and 2 other girls and take us to the shower. They'd watch us shave our legs, all those things at first, which was demoralizing then, knowing they're watching us. Then they'd say, kiss each other, do these certain things. And then when first time that he raped me, he came to my room and did what he did. He actually used a key, and that's actually how things got caught. So anyway, sorry. So they ended up also getting the girl Caroline pregnant. She's dead now because she hung herself in prison. She had 6 months before she got out. And see, we were trying to tell everyone, look, this is happening to us. We wrote letters. They wouldn't get out. Nobody believed us until we had to put semen on a reg. And I know this is very graphic. I'm just being honest because I'll explain why later. And finally got it. That still didn't matter. They didn't test it, nothing. We did everything until Caroline got pregnant. And when I went through things that it was sick. But the worst part was when we got out, we went to the same block, New Cottage. And a girl by the name of Caroline, we were going to rec, got out of the hole. They did suspend the guys or whatever because she was pregnant. One of the guys remained because he just was like the person that looked out, didn't understand why he stayed. And he hung, and hear them yelling and screaming, and that there you see her, Caroline. I walked past, she was 2 doors down. You had to go this way to go out to rec, and I looked to my left and she's hanging. And then here comes, not going to say his name, cut her down. And for me, I had never seen anything like that. And then I was out for blood, right? Then it was like I was dead to the world. Didn't care. In prison, it's a world within a world. You get a girlfriend, you do these things. You have to adapt and survive to live in prison. That's just how it is. And for me. And so after that, of course, I was getting into drugs then. Could get any drug I wanted and did. Spent every dollar. My mother was sending me money at that point in prison, and bam, drugs. Got out of prison 2 years later, started doing, using the same guy, went back to him. He was still doing the same thing, which was using every drug he could imagine. Well, at that point, he was using meth and heroin. Funny, because I always looked down on meth like it wasn't. It was such a bad drug as I'm putting a needle in my arm. So I got out and went back to him, promised my mom, of course, oh, I swear I'm going to stay sober, Mom. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to do everything. Thank you so much for being there for me and visiting me and all these things. And at this point, my sister, my oldest sister, she didn't want any part of me. She didn't talk to me and still didn't. It took 16 years. And so after my mom just had given up and was like, I can't do this anymore, I left, stayed with him, and then I started thinking, I don't want to prostitute. Not that it's a bad thing, because I probably would have if I hadn't figured out this. How are we going to get drugs, because we don't have jobs? Who can work with needles in our arms and see these track marks? So I was very smart, and I am very smart. Again, I told you I can manipulate anyone. So I started calling in prescriptions, right? I thought, you know what, I'll be a doctor. I'm educated. I can change my voice. I can talk like I'm country. I can talk like I'm Scottish, British. They always said I should have been an actress. So I started calling in prescription. It was working. Couldn't get caught, making thousands, bought a house, and selling these drugs so I could get heroin. That was my baby. I just wanted to get heroin. So I would get all these scripts. I would dress up as a nurse. I went into a prison. And I'm saying all this not to boast, but this is what addiction does. This isn't funny. This is something that I don't sugarcoat what I've done. So I traveled to Florida because I heard of this doctor who was in prison who could get me a bunch of DEA numbers. So I dressed up like a lawyer. I printed out this. Back then, you didn't have to, it wasn't like internet like they have that now. That was in like, the early 2000s. So I dressed up like a lawyer, had the license, the certifications, all those things, right? I couldn't make this up. Walked into the prison, said I was an attorney, and guess what? Let me right in. Got to talk to the doctor, got the DEA numbers, and I was off for the races. I was going to all different states, doing all these things at the same time. I'm still plugging my addiction, still. Then I get pregnant again. And I remember calling my mother, right? And telling her, like, I don't want to do this anymore because I'm so caught up, but I'm pregnant, and it's such a sick cycle because it's like a little piece of me that maybe was left that was alive felt the need to call my mom and say, I'm pregnant, I need help, I need to get away. Now at this point I turned my brother, who is amazing, onto heroin, and I live with that guilt to this day. And he's coming to where I'm at, getting heroin. I'm telling him where to go, all these things. And again, things have to come to a halt because I'm pregnant, because I think I can do this and get sober and get away from this guy who, by the way, is abusing me as well. So my mother, once again, comes, gets me, puts me in a place in Kentucky called the Druggie House. I detoxed for 7 days. That's it. Didn't go to another rehab. She said, you know what? We need to do a geographical change. You're going to go to Naples. See, my family, they have a house in Naples too, and you're going to go there. And you're going to get sober, and you stay away from that man. And you're going to have your baby, and you'll be fine. I can't go through another abortion. That killed me, Katie. So I went to Florida, was doing really well. I was actually staying sober. I got sober and was living with a woman who I met at a meeting who was worth like $250 million. I became her assistant. Got to meet amazing people, musicians in the rooms, and I'm walking in these rooms, hearing people share their story, saying that they're a piece of shit and they have this guilt and they've done this, and I'm like, wow, I did that too, and I could find similarities, right? But I still wasn't willing to surrender at all. I still was lying. I still was manipulating. I still was calling in prescriptions for my baby's father in Ohio, still doing that sober, right? Still doing those things so that he could stay high and that he didn't have to be dope sick. And still taking calls from my brother, what's the dope boy's number, Katie, I'm sick. And he's working for my father. And I'm, all these things, right? So I ended up conning this is so crazy, conning my baby's father, said he couldn't live without me, and I got him a plane ticket because I was living actually in a $14 million home and could do this, right? I manipulated my way in there. That's the only reason, because I actually called prescriptions in their name too. And because everything that I touched, every person that I used was a puzzle piece of how I could use them, how I could manipulate them to get my way. And this is when I was sober. And it wasn't sober, really. It was just dry because I was not willing. I wasn't changing my behaviors, right? So he comes to Florida. My parents come down there for my mom. My dad would not talk to me and hadn't talked to me for a long time. So that he'd been like 3-4 years. My dad has never smoked a cigarette. Just not into it. So my mom comes down there. My boyfriend, baby's father's there. She really doesn't even recognize him. I make up his name, say it's a different name, even though she's met him a few times. So she thinks he's this great guy who's a painter in Florida. Another lie. So anyway, he ends up leaving to go to Tennessee. I follow him, left everything there, pregnant, got high. I got high on the Ultram that I called in. It's not, people think it's a schedule, whatever. It's also, it's something that you abuse for sure. And so I use that like, oh, I'm not using heroin, I'm not. So I had my baby, and I had her, and for 3, maybe 2 months, I stayed sober. It was the neatest thing in the world. It was this little girl that was beautiful to my soul. She was everything to me. Now, mind you, I'm in Tennessee. My boyfriend's mother's there, who's been to prison before. His whole family's been to prison. She sells drugs. She sells oxys. She gives them to us so that we can sell them. She asks me to call in prescriptions. It's the devil's playground in Tennessee. So I'm there with my little girl, and I'm trying to stay sober, and I'm in pain, and from having her, and then I started taking Darvocets, right, and was able to. I don't think you can really say you can control it, because I was maybe 100 pounds then, because I wouldn't eat. All I cared about was her, thinking that I've got her in this great environment, and I'm going to keep her. And we ended up, for me, selling drugs and doing these things. Smoking crack, doing all these things with my child in the house. We got another house. I thought, you know what? We need to get away. We need to go away from her. We need to go away from this family. It's the devil's playground. If we get away, maybe we can stop. So we got a house from the money, and I'm still selling drugs. He's still, here, do this. It's like I'm a puppet. Wind me up, wind me up. And I remember I was my little girl was at this point in a jumper, and I was in the garden. I'm raking, or I'm weeding, and I'm in a bikini, and this old man's looking. And the first time I realized maybe he doesn't love me, I was blindsided. He hit me with a 2x4. He started beating the crap out of me. I ended up in the hospital, right? I don't even know. I guess he got Margot. The neighbor called the police. That became the abuse. I always covered that up and thought it was nothing, because I thought I was so strong. But that's when I realized I can't get away, because at that point the nurse said, do you want me to call your parents in Ohio? Do you want to file charges? Wouldn't do that. Then it just got worse, right? My addiction got worse. I went from the place that we bought, which was a trailer. I call it a house. It was a trailer, and still selling drugs. Had black eyes, just a crazy madness. He's cheating on me. I don't care, because all I want to do is get high. At this point, nothing mattered. I would take my little girl to the neighbor's house. She would watch her for weeks at a time, because all I cared about was smoking crack at that point. They didn't really have heroin at that point in Tennessee, so I would take oxys from his mother. Anything I could get, still have money, come get Margot, because I'd feel that guilt, just a little bit of guilt, like I miss my baby, I miss my girl. Then it caught up to me. I went to Ohio, and I started doing more prescriptions. Now the police are finding out this is a big deal. This is like nationwide. It's Vegas. It's all over. Who is this person? Why can't we catch her, right? So I got, he started, I left him, and he came to Ohio, and I couldn't get a prescription off something. I can't remember really what happened at that point, but he started stealing in people's cars and stole credit cards, okay? And they caught him, and I was with him when we cashed to get, stuff to sell to dope boys to get high, and the police recognized me, because they know me like the back of their hand. And I took the case. They said, did you do that? Because they said it was a bald man that was stealing the cars. Did you do it? And I said, no, it was me. I took the case, and I said, please, told the father of my child, please, 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 just take care of my baby. Just take care of my baby. And I knew it wouldn't happen. I tried to put my daughter with my sister, all those things, right? And I was on the run and went to prison. They finally caught me, went to prison again, another 2 years, got out. And this is where it gets really, like I said, I've done 13 years in prison. I've done life in installments off and on, right? So I started into heroin bad. I got out. went to Ohio with my little girl. I got pregnant again. And here I am. I don't care that I have a child inside me. I don't care that I have a little girl next to me. I started using this. Somebody came in and they had a needle. And I said, well, what's that, man? What is that? How's the high? And, you blow your mind. And I am chasing whatever can make me feel the best, whatever I can do to feel nothing but this high. That's what I wanted. So I said, let me do it. Let me try it. And, of course, my boyfriend was all for it. And the guy did it, and it was balls to the wall then. Pregnant. I tried to hide it and put foundation. I'm pregnant, stabbing myself with heroin, not knowing if it was going to kill me, not knowing anything. And then I'm still calling in prescriptions, still doing that thing, because remember, I didn't get caught for that. I got caught for the credit card thing, right? Done the burglary, all those things. So I'm still doing that because we have to supply it, right? We have to keep buying this heroin, and I have to supply everybody else too, because anybody that sees what I'm doing, they want to be my best friend, right? And so I'd go in the bathroom, I'd do it, and he left. He said, I can't do this anymore. I got to take our daughter. We got to get away, because I sent somebody to get the prescription, which I never do. They got caught, and guess who they told on? So I had a warrant out. Now I have a warrant in 2 different states because they're starting to catch on. And so I'm on the run, and I could tell you some crazy stories. Police came there, and I lied and said I was somebody else and changed my voice and hid being 7 months pregnant and all these things that happen as I'm getting high. Well, I go to, he says, you can see Margot. That's her 3rd birthday. You can come and see her. And I said, okay, all right. And I drove there. And he said, but I want you to go to the hotel. I said, okay. Now, mind you, I had 99 indictments, facing 10, 20 years in prison for prescriptions. Now, I go there, and a family member, I called and said, where's he at? I want to see my little girl. It's her birthday. That's all I want to do is see her. I had thousands of pills. I was calling in there too, big and pregnant. And the family member goes, well, I need some. Can you give me some money? I need some pills. I need blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, okay? Because I said no, she called, told them where I was at. They came, kicked in the door at a hotel, and my little girl was there. And they drew guns out at me. I was 8 months pregnant. All these pills hidden in the ceiling. They found a few of them. And both of us said they weren't ours, and they charged us both. I went to jail in Tennessee. I'm getting ready to have my son. Abscess all in my arms, okay? And I go there. I say, you gotta put me on methadone. You have to put me on methadone. My baby will die. If I'm not on methadone, my baby will die. Well, back then, especially in Tennessee, they didn't know that. They weren't educated with that, nothing. But really, I didn't care about my child at that point dying. I just wanted to be high. I wanted to stay high. And I was in the Tennessee jail, started bleeding, and they took me to the hospital. And when they took me to the hospital, the doctor said, she has to be on methadone. Has to be, or this child will die. She shouldn't even be in jail. So they got me on the methadone. I'm doing that. They said I had to go back to the doctor. They said, you're having your child in 2 days. So I go there, go to the hospital. It was one of the hardest things. I've been raped, I've been molested, all those things. I've done a lot of horrible things in my life. Abortion, been through a lot. The hardest thing, one of the hardest things, was having my child in prison where you're on methadone, you're not high like you were. I'm starting to feel the guilt. I'm starting to feel the pain of everything that I've caused my parents, my children, and I'm still not believing in a God at all. In fact, I probably cursed it. And I they're saying you have 2 days with your son. He came out, he was so beautiful, and they put him on my chest. The father of my child was there. And my daughter was actually in Ohio because my sister got her. I was able to get her. I signed her off. That was the only good thing I did to get her away from that family. And he said, he put my baby on my chest. And I'm looking at the clock like I can't. Because I'm looking at this child. I'm not high, and I'm knowing that I have to give. They're going to rip this baby away from me. And gosh, I wasn't supposed to cry. I don't like crying. I've told my story so much, I just don't like crying. And so on the third day, of course, my hand's shackled right here to the bed, right? And I'm holding my baby, and they said the deputies come in, and I remember the woman was crying, and I said, I don't want to leave my child. And the guy said, look, you got to get help. Look at your arms. I had big abscess. He said, you won't have your baby. And then they came and told me that he was addicted to heroin and methadone. So they told me that, this is crazy. You wouldn't even believe me, but you can check it out. They said that I have to, in the jail, breastfeed him. But I couldn't see him, so they had to give me a handheld pump. I had to stay in booking, right? And they had to give me a pump so I could breastfeed. I can't remember, see what it's called because I'm so upset, but it was a pump, so I could pump out milk full of drugs, methadone, so that they could give it to my baby's father to give to my child. And I couldn't see, feel, touch my child. And they would bring in a onesie, this woman, and this is where the first time I heard really about God. Brought in a onesie, and I'm in a booking in a hold. Nobody's there, right? And I have to take methadone, and that's another story. But they brought in a onesie, and because I couldn't pull the milk out, I was crying so much. I missed my babies, my son, my daughter, guilt. And and I remember they were making fun of me, calling me the milkman, the COs, because they called me a junkie all the time. Give the junkie the bottle, and, which is fine. And so they had to bring in a onesie. I'm smelling it. I'm like, why am I smelling it? And this woman comes in. She goes, honey, don't listen to him. God's got you. I'm like, there is no God. She goes, honey, there's a God. And she gave me a Bible. And I'm not trying to make this religious or anything, but I smelled that onesie, and I was able to get some milk, right? And I gave him milk that lasted for about 2 months. But at that point, they couldn't give me methadone anymore. So they gave me 2 80-milligram Oxycontins a day in jail. And I said, what are you doing? My baby can't have these. Yes. We've talked to the pediatrician. We're not allowed to administer it. You'd have to leave the jail, and we don't have the funds for that. This is a little Tennessee hillbilly jail. And I'm like, oh, my God, I was doomed. So they were, doing that while I'm pumping this milk. And I'm thinking I'm going to get out soon. Because of all that, I was able to cop to a plea to 10 years of probation with 6 months and all this stuff. Well, because I copped to that, Ohio wants me for prescriptions, right? So now, and I'm on Oxycontin, they're giving it to me, and I'm all messed up all the time, nodding out, doing the things that I usually do when I'm high in jail. The nurse, they wouldn't even watch me take it. They would slide it under my thing because it's only me in that booking, and I would take it. So they extradite me. I think that's what it's called. I don't know, but extradite me to Ohio, and I am lost. I am dead, and I am numb. I don't care about anything, anyone. I'm just like done. So I have this attorney. And I had that Bible. That Bible went with me. And still not believing nothing. So I get a public defender. They call them public pretenders. But actually, she was really good. And she was like, I look at all these things, and it's not only you in all this. Like, why are you taking, like I saw another family member, and I said, look, because I'm strong, I don't care. I just want to go to prison. I just want to go to prison. I don't care anymore. He had already at that point, as long as I had been there, he was already with somebody else when I called. My daughter ended up going back there to Tennessee because my sister couldn't do it anymore, and because she has her own vices and addictions. And I called to talk to my kids. A woman answered, and she said, "Don't call here anymore. Your kids, they're no longer your kids, and we're going to get married." And I just couldn't believe it. So I went to Ohio prison. They gave me 5 years, and I was lost. I mean, I was just sickened and disgusted, and was doing so many drugs in prison, right? So how I first started really surrendering was I was in prison, hated prison. They moved us to DCI and all these things, and just, but you have to adapt, right? Parents weren't taking care of me. Nobody was taking care of me. Had no money, so I'm a manipulator, so I shaved my head, and I acted boyish because I knew if I shaved my head I could get girls and get money and get high or get whatever. And I did that, and went to another correction. They transferred me to DCI. Still had that Bible. And I remember sitting on a park bench next to somebody just crying. Usually I just don't cry. And there was a woman. And I looked at her, I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, what's up? And how long do you got?" And I got 5 years, and I'm just devastated, whatever, I said. And she said, and she had this big smile on her face, and she was humble. And she said, "I've got life without parole." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm thinking, how can I cry? And I'm sitting next to someone that has life without parole. And I'm crying. And she is the head of Narcotics Anonymous. She was an addict, is an addict. And she's sober and has, I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is nuts." And I said, "Well, what? I want to do what you do. I want to smile. I'm sick of faking. I'm sick of faking, like trying, like I'm gay and doing all these things when I'm not, and trying just to get to eat in here, or have nice things and be comfortable and get high." And she was like, "Look, come with me one day, follow me around." And then she said, "Do you believe in anything?" And I'm like, "Not really." And she was like, and she smiled, I'll never forget. And she said, "Well, I want you to believe in this ketchup packet." She had a ketchup packet. I'm like, "What the hell?" And she said, "Know that ketchup packet is more powerful than you are." And I'm like, "Okay." And she kept saying it's God's will and all this shit, right? And so I did what she said, and grew my hair out. Really, I got sober in prison, mind you. I was dope sick in prison, so I got sober and started a program called Footsteps for Women, because I came to believe in a power greater than myself, right? And that's a whole other story, and I know I'm talking a lot, so I don't want to get into all of that, but started a PREA Act. I started speaking about rape and making it knowledgeable. I was doing things that I normally wouldn't do. I flipped that manipulation and that motivation to get high into doing something that was actually productive. And I wanted to touch people's lives, because I would hear these stories of these girls that are in here for murder, but their mom pimped them out and raped them, and their dad did this and all these things, and they got on drugs. And so I started these programs, started doing really well, did well, grew my hair back, and I believed in God. I believed in something, I can say that. Read the Bible, was so curious, I was on fire. And I'll never forget, there were certain tests that I would ask and all these things, but I won't get into that. But so I got out of prison 2014. I stayed sober, was doing extremely, extremely well. My father had talked to me, and it had been 13 years, and I finally got to talk to my father. Now my brother to this day hasn't talked to me, but was sober for 14, 15, 10, 11, 12, 6 years I was sober, right? Well, I still didn't really believe in something. I wasn't really working a program. I was kind of dry. I ended up, I met my husband, who was sober, motivated me, and is an amazing guy, right? And he knows my story. I got pregnant. I had a child, and he's amazing. Then I had a second child, still sober. And then my dad bought us a house, and we were paying rent on it. And I thought, I've made it. I'm doing well. Not working a program, really not really doing what I'm really supposed to be doing. Kind of still lying, all those things. Well, an old friend that I knew came over, and my cousin was on drugs, and Kirk and I had broken up. I was at prison. I'm institutionalized. Institutionalized is a whole other subject, but I'm very paranoid, or was very paranoid, and didn't know anything about tech, really, with phones and things, and so. We broke up because of my behavior and things that I would do, and he was also not very, he was doing some things too. He cheated on me and did things, and I wasn't working any kind of program, so I didn't know how to cope and use tools, right? So even though I had them, didn't know how to use them, and so I relapsed. Long story short, he left me, found out, saw the marks, saw all that. My CPS came into my life. And I took care of my children. I love them so much. And CPS came into our life because he called the police on me. I was with two guys the night before and woke up. Blood was everywhere. I don't know what happened to me. Still to this day, I don't, because of the drugs that I took. And I called him. He came there, called the ambulance. I wouldn't go with them, so they called CPS. And that's when my change began to happen, of complete surrender and working a program. I went to the hospital, all those things, went to a mental ward. I was doing drugs after drugs, but I finally could surrender. When they took my two children, and I didn't have a choice. I couldn't get sober and get them back. I couldn't do these things. Now, mind you, my oldest two are still in Tennessee. And I knew I wanted to get them back from day one. So when I came to Ohio and got away from the one guy that abused me and was all this stuff, I knew I had to get sober. I needed to get them back, because that family that was on drugs kept them from me, wouldn't let me talk to them, nothing, prison, everything. Told them horrible things about me, which is fine, because, some of them I'm sure are true, some of them not. I went into a rehab. They said he took the kids, ended up at his parents' house, and it was horrible, because they were my world, right? So they said, you have to go to a rehab. I called in another prescription, got busted, didn't go to rehab, or didn't go to prison. The judge sentenced me to a rehab, which is very unusual for me. Usually I go straight to prison. And that's when I surrendered. I really, truly wanted a life. I had tasted kind of what sober and how to live. And then, so I went to a place called the Monday program. It was life-changing for me. I found my sponsor, who is a doctor, by the way, and who, it's funny how God, the universe, works when, he puts people in your life, if you truly surrender, that you need, that can help you, and that you can help them as well. So I had this doctor who had 27 years, and she became my sponsor. And the Monday program, I did everything in the world they said to do. I surrendered. I was willing. I remember they would tell me, like, that if you can't believe in anything yet, then that chair. And I heard somebody say ketchup packet, and I remembered back then. And so when I completely surrendered, I was in my room. I still had that Bible. That's why it goes full circle. I opened it up to a verse. It was Jeremiah 29:11. And I read it, and I kept reading it, and I kept reading it. And then I read different parts of the Bible I won't get into, but I found strength in my weaknesses, is what I'm going to say. And I started to believe that there was a higher power, that there was something out there, because things started happening in my life that I could have never imagined. I got out of the Monday program. I utilized my tools. I unlearned my behaviors, and I got my kids back, my two youngest. Now, I still need to get these two back, right? Now, they're in foster care right now, or not right now, but at this point, because of the their dad and the girlfriend abusing and using drugs in front of them and all kinds of stuff. And so this is my chance to get them back. I fight. I remain sober. I'm speaking at all these different events. I am working a program. I am able to play the tape all the way through. Now, when I say that, and it sounds easy, it's not. Because in sobriety, things happen. It doesn't mean that you get, you're on pink clouds and lemonade and have all this great stuff, because that's not what happens when you're sober. Shit happens, and you have to learn to deal with it. You have to use your coping skills, right? Because I can't say a spoon is going to trigger me to get high, right? I have to change my thinking and say, that spoon I feed my children with. That's how, in sobriety, I was able to change my thinking. And that's how I was able to stay sober, man. And so my now husband, we stayed together. I started doing certifications for peer recovery. I got certified to be a peer recovery coach. Nobody would believe that. And then we got married. And then I went to court, fought for my kids. Now, mind you, that judge said, you will never get these kids, ever. I got those kids. I got them, all 4 of mine. Now, mind you, I'm sober. I bought a home in a very nice area. I have all 4 of my children back. This is just the hope that happens. These are the promises that they say that will happen if you stay sober. I'm not saying you'll get some big house or you'll get these things, but if you do the next right thing and you stay sober and you truly work on yourself and you help others, things will happen in your life. I'm telling you. And I just couldn't believe it. I got off probation. I never thought I could do probation. And the judge came down when it was day of. I had no clue. I got off way early too, and he came down, and this just happened. He came down, and the judge who sentenced me hugged me. He said, "I need you to work for us, man." He heard me speak, and I hugged him, and my probation officer became like a confident, I loved her. She believed in me, and I believed in her, and she cared because I hated authority. Okay, and I believed, and she allowed me to see that there are people that care, that there are people in authority that really aren't bad people. And I got off probation, and those things happened, and it just, to me, is mind-blowing from the person that I was, the person that wore wigs and, manipulated anybody, I just did so many different things. But I want to say, too, that if I wasn't willing, none of this would happen. I can't get sober. I had to completely surrender to a power that was greater than me. I had to have a spiritual awakening, and I did. I finally believed in a higher power that I choose to call God. Without that, I don't think I would have made it. I'm not saying that church is going to keep me sober, because it's not. I'm not saying AA, NA, Smart Recovery, any of those things are going to keep me sober, because they're not. I have to keep myself sober. I can't save everybody. I can't do those things, but what I can do is share my story and share hope. And hopefully you can find some similarities in my story and know that change can happen, but it starts with me and it ends with me. And I have to let go of all my ego, my pride, my big head. I have to inflate that bubble, and I have to work harder than I've ever worked before and unlearn those behaviors and start changing my life. But it took me to come out and step and do things that were not comfortable. It took me to look in the mirror and say, I love myself, because I never loved myself. It took me to face the things that happened that were traumatic. I no longer use them as a crutch. I actually was able to emotionally regulate my feelings and get past it. Not to say that I don't ever think about those horrible things, but I know how to deal with them because I went through therapy. I reached out. I spoke with other people who are similar, who are like me, and I did it. So I probably spoke a really long time, and I didn't say a whole, everything that happened, but I just wanted to come here and bring some hope, because if I can stay clean, I think anybody can stay clean, and I know they can. I just had to surrender. that's it. I had to be completely willing and able. And by the way, my sister, who I didn't speak to for 16 years, 17 years, she's my hero. She's my best friend. She talks to me all the time. She believes in me and she trusts in me. A church that I go to gives me their key so I can clean their building before. That's crazy. Give this convict, felon, thief a key to their building because they trust me. But it didn't come easy. It doesn't just happen. I had to take footsteps. I had to bite off one bite of the elephant at a time. And I had to look in the mirror and know that I'm enough and I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim anymore of all those things that I went through. I'm a survivor. And I'm going to help other people know that they're not a victim. And I didn't use it as a crutch anymore. So those are things that I just wanted to share. I hope you enjoyed my story. I don't know if it was scattered or not. I was a little nervous, but my name's Katie, and I'm an addict. Also, let's see, I started speaking, publicly speaking, and for me, I found that if you do not accept challenges, accept things, meaning if somebody asks you to do something and it's for recovery for me, you do it. You do it because they do it. It takes service work, things like that. So I started speaking publicly, and I remember I spoke in front of 150 people, then it was 300 people, then it was juveniles, then people are asking me. I don't do it to boast or to be like I do it because I hope and pray that someday that someone out there, one person can hear me, and they can look in my eyes and know that I am sober and I made it, and that I can do this. From 13 years in prison, having my son in prison, being raped in prison, abortions, I've been through it all, right? If I can do it, anybody can do it. I truly believe that, but it takes work. Nothing good comes easy. And I didn't love myself when I was first sober, and you won't either. If you're using and you're just getting sober and you can't look at yourself in the mirror, that's okay. I couldn't either. I don't know too many people that could. They're faking it. They're boasting. I also was prideful. I had to take baby steps and challenge myself. And as corny as it sounds, I had to listen to my therapist say, you look in the mirror every day and say, I love myself. And it took 2 weeks before I didn't cry in the mirror looking.